I want you to believe me, said Kelly. The baby is mine, Kelly Morrison whispered with his dying breath, and with those 4 words he shattered a love story that had taken years to build. Kelly Morrison's final words hung in the crisp October air like poison, delivered with his dying breath as blood pooled beneath his shattered skull. The autumn leaves seemed to freeze mid-fall as James stared down at his wife's tormentor, then slowly turned those questioning eyes toward Brenda, eyes that had once held nothing but adoration, now clouded with the first seeds of terrible doubt. Brenda felt her 6-month pregnancy like a weight pulling her toward the earth as she watched her husband's face transform. The man who had carved wooden birds for her hair, who had built their home with his own hands, who whispered sweet promises against her neck each morning, that man was disappearing before her eyes, replaced by a stranger wearing doubt like armor. "James," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass in the cold air. "You know that's not true. You know I've never—" But James stepped backward, away from her reaching hands, away from the life growing in her belly, away from everything they had built together. Kelly's timing had been perfect, his final act of cruelty more devastating than years of unwanted gifts and midnight serenades could ever be. The estate grounds that had witnessed their courtship now bore witness to their destruction. The same oak tree where James had first kissed her cast shadows over Kelly's corpse, and Brenda understood, with horrible clarity, that some poisons work slowly. John came into the world on a February morning so cold the windows wept ice, his first cries piercing the winter air like defiance itself. The moment Brenda held him, she felt love so fierce it temporarily stopped her tears. He was perfect. Unmistakably James's son, with his father's strong jaw and gentle eyes. "He's the image of his daddy," Mrs. Henderson declared, examining the newborn with professional authority. "Anyone with eyes can see it. Got James's hands, too, going to be a craftsman like his father." But this evidence meant nothing to the absent James, wherever he was hiding from the life he'd abandoned. Brenda resumed her weeping, now crying for a son who would grow up fatherless, marked by scandal, carrying the shadow of Kelly Morrison's dying lie. John grew into a thoughtful child who brought his mother wildflowers, trying to coax smiles from lips that had forgotten how to curve upward. At 4, he asked the question that tore fresh wounds in Brenda's heart. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" "Your daddy had to go away," she whispered, fresh tears joining the eternal stream. "But he loves you very much." The boy accepted this with resignation, of a child accustomed to sorrow, though Brenda caught him sometimes staring out windows as if expecting a stranger to walk up their path and claim him. Years passed like seasons of grief. Brenda aged rapidly, her beauty dissolving in the acid of constant tears. John learned to navigate the whispers that followed him through Millbrook, the questions about his parentage, the speculation about his mother's virtue, the legacy of Kelly Morrison's posthumous victory. Then, when John was 9 years old, Dr. Harrison appeared at their door like an angel of revelation. The elderly physician clutched medical records with shaking hands, his face grave with the weight of 2 long-kept secrets. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice trembling with guilt and determination, "I have something that will change everything." Kelly Morrison was sterile, had been since childhood fever took that ability from him. He could never have fathered children. Those were the lies of a bitter, dying man who couldn't bear to lose, even in death. Brenda stared at the medical documents through eyes that had shed oceans of tears, and for the first time in 9 years, wept from joy instead of sorrow. The vindication crashed over her like a cleansing tide, washing away years of doubt and shame. "Why didn't you come forward before?" she whispered. "Patient confidentiality bound me," the doctor replied, shame coloring his cheeks. "But watching what my silence cost you, my conscience finally overcame my duty to the dead." Armed with this proof, Brenda began searching for James with the desperation of a woman who had lost 9 years to a lie. She hired investigators, followed every lead, spent her modest savings pursuing rumors of a carpenter who had vanished into America's vastness. John, now old enough to understand, helped however he could. "Are you looking for my father?" he asked with quiet intensity. "Yes," Brenda admitted, unable to lie to those eyes so like James's. "What was he like?" For the first time since Kelly's death, Brenda truly spoke of James, not the doubt-poisoned man who had abandoned them, but the gentle craftsman who had loved her with such pure devotion. She told John about the wooden birds, the careful way his father's hands had shaped both furniture and dreams, the morning songs and evening promises that had filled their short time together. The investigator finally found James living under an assumed name 3 states away, working as a cabinet maker in monastic solitude. He had never remarried, never sought other love, carrying his guilt like a hair shirt that grew heavier with each passing year. Brenda wrote him a letter that trembled in her hands. "My dearest James, Kelly Morrison was sterile. He could never have fathered children. The doctor's records prove what I have tried to tell you for 9 years. John is your son, born of our love, carrying your eyes and your gentle heart. We have both suffered enough. Please come home. All my love, Brenda." When James received the letter, he collapsed in his workshop among the half-finished furniture that had never filled the emptiness in his chest. The medical records were undeniable proof of what his heart had whispered during countless sleepless nights. He had abandoned the woman he loved and the son he had never known because of a dead man's final cruelty. He closed his workshop that very day and began the long journey home. John saw him first. A year after James' return, Brenda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was celebrated with joy instead of shadowed by doubt. She had stopped crying at last, her drum of tears transformed into a fountain of hope. "What shall we name her?" Brenda asked, her hand on her growing belly. John said immediately, with the wisdom of a child who had lived through darkness, "Because she's bringing hope back to our family." Hope Whitmore was born on a bright spring morning that seemed to wash the last shadows from their lives. She was healthy and beautiful, her arrival marking the complete healing of wounds that had festered for a decade. The years that followed overflowed with the joy they had almost lost forever. John grew into a fine young man who became both a craftsman like his father and a counselor, helping other families navigate the storms that threaten love. His childhood experience of living through trauma and healing had given him unique insights into the resilience of the human heart. Hope brought laughter and light to their home, growing into a spirited child who seemed to carry sunshine in her pockets. The contrast between John's thoughtful nature and Hope's effervescent personality created perfect balance in their recovered family. James and Brenda became pillars of their community, their story inspiring others who face the kinds of trials that test love's limits. They never took a single day of happiness for granted, having learned how precious and fragile it could be. Years later, when John married and had children, in the family cemetery, 2 headstones stood side by side, their inscription simple and true. Love is stronger than doubt, deeper than pain, and more enduring than death. But the real monument to their love existed in the lives they had touched, the children they had raised, and the story they had left behind. A story proving that even the deepest sorrow could be transformed into joy, that even a drum of tears could become a fountain of hope. Their love story became exactly what James had always promised in those early days of courtship. Not perfect, but unbreakable. Not without pain, but stronger for having endured it. A testament that true love, once planted deep enough, could survive any storm. And in the garden where Brenda had once faced her tormentor,